So thank you, ladies. And we'll go right into introducing Roger. Roger, it is a pleasure having you with us, just as it has been a pleasure having you in many of the activities over the years. I won't say how many years because we don't want to give away secrets about age or whatever, but it has been many years, and thank you for all of that, and thank you for coming today.
Thank you very much.
Roger, as Elaine pointed out, is a Bajan-Canadian. And Roger has been involved in music for so many years. He has been involved in music in his native Barbados. He has been the lead singer and arranger of the Sand Pebbles, a popular Caribbean dance band. And Roger, please correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that two of Roger's siblings had been part of the Merry Men band. And people in this, am I correct, Roger?
One of my oldest brother.
Yes, one of them. Sorry, I added one more on. Sorry.
Yes, the brother played with me in the Sand Pebbles. So
okay, so he did play.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Roger has a history of music. While in his native Barbados, he was the General Secretary, Musicians and Entertainers Guild of Barbados. He was he was the Cultural Affairs Officer for Music in the Ministry of Information and Culture. He was the Music Secretary of Carifesta 4 when he was in Barbados. He continued that tradition when he came to Canada. I remember Roger being the artistic director of Banja, and they used to have such wonderful shows. He was also in the performing company members, collectives of Black artists, POBA, a board member at Metro Toronto Folks Art Council, a juror on the Toronto Arts Council, Festival and Urban Arts, a juror also at Juno's World Music Committee, Canadian Academy of Recording Arts and Sciences. Roger continued in all sorts of different positions, including president of PRO, Secretary, Organization of Calypso Artists. He was a board member of the Festival Management Committee, Artistic Director of Toronto Caribbean Carnival. So this is only just part of who Roger was and what he has done. He has, he's a music program tutor. He was the artistic director, Calypso Stars at Harbourfront Center. He was associated with the Canadian Caribbean Association of Halton. Roger, in his own right, was also involved in Calypso singing. And he did a number of those. I remember Roger doing some Calypsos for us at the church years ago when we had a concert. Roger was active, and he continues to be active in the Caribbean Carnival Arts Mural Monument, and the musical director, Queen of the Road, tribute to Calypso Queen, Calypso Rose, who is a Trinidadian and one of the first female Calypso monarchs. So it is a great pleasure to welcome this gentleman who is also, and I didn't add this in, he's a master's student at York University. So I don't know where he gets the time to practice, where he gets the time to do anything. But Roger, welcome, even though you are Bajan.
Thank you very much, Claudette. That's very kind of you. And thank you everyone for your invitation and the opportunity to participate in this particular project. Which is, I'm looking at the screen and seeing all of these people that I love. Some I know well, some I don't. And I hope that our evening's conversation will bring some satisfaction or some information maybe that you don't know, or I hope. I haven't gotten a lot of direction in terms of what was expected of me for this presentation. And I'm not sure what the format is. Is it simply a question and answer format, or so please, if I seem a little hesitant, it's just because I'm not absolutely clear, how we proceed and what exactly what kind of information I'm expected to share tonight. But I'm here with an open mind and open heart, and look forward to the opportunity to engage with all of you.
Claudette might be able to reply.
The topic that you said that you were going to be doing, that you were discussing, you have 40 minutes to talk about it, and then we have an extra 20 minutes where there'll be questions and answers. You know that sheet, yeah, that's what you'll be doing. So it's 60 minutes for you, but 40 you are talking and 20 you are answering questions.
Okay.
Moderated by.
Well, I probably don't need 40 minutes, but I'll do the best I can to keep to the program. As you mentioned, I'm from Barbados. My family is all there. My father's family, I think his great going back about 10 or 11 generations, was one of the first English folks to settle on the island, some 400 years ago. Robert Gibbs got married there in 1635, I believe. So he was one of the first people there. And the family has been on the island ever since. On my mother's side, it's even more complicated scenario. Her family has been on the island, and I have family in St. Vincent, family in Trinidad, and probably family in a few other islands that I don't know about. But a very deep roots on the island. And in terms of Barbados, Barbados is sort of a unique country in the Caribbean, in that it was probably the first English settlement in the Caribbean. It wasn't the first. St. Kitts was a few years before, but Barbados quickly became the sort of the staging ground for the English settlements in the Caribbean, and for it quickly became a very prosperous island after about the first 30 years of very difficult times, as a result of sugar. It's the land of sugar cane, they call it. Barbados the land. I got some teeth missing to prove it. So it's you know, the island was a monoculture. It was one of the very first slave societies. It was an economy entirely built on resting on the whole institution of slavery and sugar production, pretty much a monoculture. And in that regard, and brought great wealth to many people, or well, I shouldn't say many, to few people, because most of the people were not enjoying the blessings of that sugar production. In fact, Barbados, it started off as a predominantly European settlement, British mostly, and but in the 40s, 1640s and 1650s, throughout say to the 70s, the demographics changed completely as slavery increased dramatically and the production of sugar increased dramatically. And so it became basically a black country. And the history of Barbados under the British has been a very, it's been a very difficult circumstances in the Caribbean. Barbados is a small island. It's only 21 by 14. Jamaica, which is about 1,000 miles to the west in the Caribbean, is I think about 30 or 40 times the size. And Trinidad, again, about 20 times as big as Barbados. So even though it was a small island, because of its strategic location being the most eastern island of the Caribbean, it had a very pivotal role in the entire settlement of the Caribbean by the English, and also what was then the Greater Caribbean, because that included the Carolinas and the colonies of the southern states, which were more integrated with the Caribbean at that time before the American Revolution. So Barbados played a big role in settling Charleston, settling Jamaica, in the settlements of Suriname, which the English finally sold to the Dutch in exchange for New York, or New Amsterdam as it was at the time. So it had a very pivotal role, densely populated, predominantly black country with a small white minority that ruled, but also a middle class, mixed race middle class. And my family in particular were not part of the elite by any means. I think when Robert Gibbs died, he had a cow and a few acres of land, and that was about it. So he was just barely holding on. But, down through the ages, the island has, experienced a great deal of fortune at the beginning and then a steady decline throughout the 19th century as sugar ceased to be, a big income earner. And really, from emancipation in the 1830s onward, Barbados experienced a stagnant economy. And many Barbadians left the island to settle in Trinidad, in Guyana, and in some of the other nearby islands, and many other parts of the Americas, but particularly in Trinidad. In fact, to my delight and surprise, most of the Trinidadian friends I have here that I've met over the years, inevitably they have a Barbadian uncle or a grandfather or grandmother or great aunt or whatever. So there's a very deep connection between the islands, because even before the age of jet travel and so on, the movement of people between the islands was quite significant. And of course, they were all part of the same British political structure, so there was no passports or visas or anything like that required. And people moved around quite a bit. So Barbados is even though it is a very, demographically is very different to Trinidad, for instance, which is a much more multicultural, multi-ethnic, multiracial society. Barbados is predominantly Black, predominantly Anglican and Christian, and that kind of like a Quebec, Ontario scenario where Quebec would be the Trinidad and Barbados would be the Ontario in terms of its anglicized culture of people mostly of African descent. And in fact, Trinidad has that very unique character that it came under British control very late, around the 1800, which was, Barbados had already been a successful colony of the British for over 150 years. And now Trinidad comes out of the British control, and when it comes out of their control, it's what they get is a French society, a French-speaking society. A Spanish colony, technically, it's still a Spanish possession when the British took over, but it was basically populated, and the society there was French-speaking, primarily as a result of many of the French planters who immigrated there from Haiti and Martinique, Guadeloupe during that revolutionary time leading up to 1800 because of the upheaval in the Francophone world as a consequence of the Haitian Revolution and the Revolution of France. So you have very, very different societies. And I give this background only in a sense to create a context for the experience that I have had as a musician and discovering my own culture and the journey that I've had in music and in the arts, and in discovering who I am as a West Indian, as a Barbadian, because growing up in the Caribbean on the British control until 1966 in Barbados, when Barbados became independent, we were taught under the classic British school system. So we learned about Shakespeare and Wordsworth and all of the wonderful flowers and poems about daffodils and all of the British history that we learned, the War of the Roses and all of that. We were not taught a lot about our own island and only when I was young, I guess we were starting to introduce West Indian history. So we did get that much, although it would not have been the case with my parents. But by the time I came along in high school in the mid 60s, we were starting to move towards a more self-discovery of who we are as people in the Caribbean. And I came to Canada first when I was about 20 or late teens, or just about 20, and ended up getting married to a young lady from Montreal, and moving back to Barbados and worked there for a while, and then coming back to Canada. The first time I lived in Canada in the mid 70s, it was a bit too much of a culture shock. It was, I didn't have the family network here or family here at all. And it was just very difficult for me to function and to find employment as a musician. And I still didn't know what I wanted to do at that point, if I wanted to continue in the arts, which was always tugging at my heartstrings, or if I needed to develop other skills and move on, having become, now a young father in 76 and having to provide for family and so on. I did end up moving back to Barbados and living there for another decade or so before coming back to Canada. in 1986, and that's where I've been ever since. And I am so grateful to Canada because, as I've come to realize, Canada has provided so much to me as an artist and so many opportunities that were not available to me in Barbados, even though I had in Barbados many opportunities that I was able to take advantage of. I think Claudette mentioned I was the Secretary General of the Musicians and Entertainers Guild of Barbados, which was a kind of the first musicians union that was formed in the island in the late 70s. The project finally fell apart after a few years. I was no longer there, but for many reasons, it was not. It transformed into different things. It became the people who were involved in it moved on into other areas of advocacy on the arts and working on copyright and other matters that they felt were more important. But I had the opportunity to work with some of the top musicians in Barbados, the mighty Gabby, among them, a gentleman called Vern Best, and a number of others. Emil Straker, who was with the Maryband. Emil was actually my mother's cousin, and that's how the Maryband started in the mid-60s or early 60s with my brother Chris and Emil, who was his basically, family, and a couple of other musicians, and that's how they got started. But they were very instrumental, very inspiring in the type of music they did, because they basically were taking Barbadian folk music and giving it a more contemporary twist or more contemporary treatment, and this created a sound that people really enjoyed. It created a more folk calypso sound that was very different from the standard calypso that was coming out of Trinidad, from the great artists of Trinidad at the time, like the Mighty Sparrow, Lord Kitchener, the Mighty Duke, Melody, the whole legion of top calypsonians that Trinidad was producing at that time in the mid-60s, which was more or less the time where Trinidad as an island was flowering. The post World War II baby boom generation had come into its own, and calypso, the music of Trinidad, was seeing its apex in terms of production and creativity and all of that. And Trinidad music, calypso, had a huge influence on Barbados at that time. Even though, a century before, Barbadians were having a big influence on Trinidad from all of the Barbadians who were moving there in the 19th century. So the music of Trinidad has always been in my blood in that sense, because I heard it in my living room being played growing up. And even though calypso at that time was not the most respectable type of music to be engaged in, you were encouraged to work towards music that had a little more respectability. If it was classical music or other types of music, calypso was not high on the list when it came to that type of sort of engagement with people, and it certainly was not taught in the schools. I never received any musical training at my high school. They didn't offer it, music, which is probably part of the reason even though I excelled in school earlier on, by late teens in high school, I kind of lost interest as music became more a passion, and I could only find that outside of school. In the late 70s, I got the opportunity to work at the Ministry of Culture on a few different projects, And as a consequence of that, I was asked to come on board as the cultural affairs officer to work with the Ministry of Information and Culture at the time. And in 1981, Barbados produced a Pan-Caribbean festival called Carafesta. First time it was held in Barbados. And it was a transformative event for me and for the island and Barbadians. Why? Because it was the very first time Barbadians saw the entire Caribbean on its doorstep. You have to realize that you can live in Barbados and still be very, very ignorant of what's going on in other islands because we didn't have the communications that we have today, and we did not have the built-in systems of education to teach us about the other parts of the Caribbean. So even though we lived in the Caribbean, we very much were on our island and connected to the metropoles. We knew what was going on in London, we knew what was going on in New York, and so on. But what was happening in Dominica or in Haiti or Cuba, we wouldn't be aware of it, and we would only hear of it maybe through the grapevine or secondhand somehow. That has changed a lot over the years, of course, as the Caribbean and the whole awareness of our region has become a lot more developed. But I had that opportunity, and I ended up then working with the ministry for 3 years, primarily as a music officer, and under the direction of a gentleman called Elombe Motley. Elombe Motley is kind of the grandfather of Barbadian culture. He was responsible for so many of the things that we have today in Barbados in terms of cultural institutions and various initiatives, like the Crop Over Festival, for instance, which is the annual carnival that Barbados has in August, the same time as the Caribana Toronto Caribbean Carnival here. Elombe is the uncle of the current Prime Minister, Miss Mia Botley. So he was very instrumental in teaching me the importance of culture and understanding and opening my mind to a lot of things. He currently lives in Jamaica. He's retired, of course, in his late 80s, and not as active in politics and culture anymore, but we still keep in touch. From there on, I coming to Canada.
Excuse me, Roger.
Yes.
I hate to interrupt, but I don't know, it's got a lot darker in the room that you're in since you came on, and people can't see you. Is it possible for you to turn on some lights? Because
Is that better?
it's a bit better. You're still pretty much in shadow, but now we can see your face. It was just there was a voice in the darkness. So.
There we go.
There we go. Thank you so much, and I'm so sorry to interrupt.
That's a lot better, yeah. So coming to Canada, and I guess this is where I really want to talk about the issues that we deal with here in this program as we address the matters of race. Growing up in Barbados in a mixed race family, because my mother's I have brown brothers and black cousins, and I went to high school at where there were maybe 20 kids, Caucasian or various shades, because Barbados, there's so many different colors. It's not just black and white. There's a whole range of shades that people have names for, and brown skin and light skin and clear skin, and this, it's a lot of different terms that people use to describe somebody's complexion. And but I come to Canada, and you know, after growing up in what I now realize was a black country, but it didn't dawn on me at the time growing up that my culture was considered a black culture. It was just, this was just my culture. It was just Barbadian. It was Caribbean. I guess it sounds maybe strange to say that, but you know, it didn't really quite dawn on me until I came here and started to engage with other people in the music and in the arts, only to realize that, you know, the music that I do and the arts that I pursue here in Canada is considered black music, or, you know, the culture that I am representing is considered a black culture. And how come you're not black? You know, was a very common question that I would get, and I still get sometimes. And I'm still not quite sure how to answer it, but it's well, you know, it's just all the music. That's what I knew, and that's what I enjoyed. That's what I was attracted to musically, and because growing up on the island, you do have the options to pursue other identities. And so as someone who presents as white, I could easily come here and pursue, you know, something, an area of art making or music that is part of the mainstream, you know. So I may find a way to express my own take on that, but basically I'm not challenging people's idea of what the music is that I'm doing or why I'm doing it. And that sort of working on being on the periphery of this scenario where, you know, I'm part of this black community, but I don't present as black. I can move freely in the white world as a white person, but my experience has been very different than the average person who probably grew up here in Canada, or in a white country. And I've always tried to see that as an absolute, it's been a blessing, of course, to have that opportunity. And of course, growing up in Barbados is a blessing, as it is in a tropical country with beautiful beaches and you know, a loving family and so on. So I consider myself twice blessed because I had that upbringing, and I also have all the things that I've been fortunate to have here in Canada as well, and that my Canadian experience and that Canada has given me. But navigating that sort of world of trying to figure out where you fit in and has sometimes been challenging at times, and working with the festival management committee, the big festival, the Caribbean Festival, in an administrative role, and having the opportunity to work with some very, very talented and people who have done some amazing stuff here in Canada in the festival community, but particularly in my role as a board member and representing the festival. It's been an interesting experience in that, to give an example, as a board member, I was part of a group of maybe 4 board members, the chair and a couple of other people who sat down with people from the Premier's office or the city to have a meeting. You're going to a meeting, and the people on the other side of the table immediately address me. And it's a very uncomfortable position to be in, because I'm not the chair of the organization. The chair is sitting next to me, but he's a black person, but the person is addressing me. And it's like, oh, wow. You know, you come across these experiences always, constantly, where your white appearance gives you a certain privilege that you didn't realize you had, but it becomes apparent to you that the person assumes that I am the person in charge. So they're addressing me, and I've brought along my team of people, when in fact it's quite the opposite. You know, this person has brought me along as someone to support the team. So there are experiences like that you have. There are experiences on, like I mentioned, where working with collective of Black artists, which is a Black dance theater company, and had a very successful run for about 15 years with them. One of the top dance theater companies in Canada in terms of producing dance work, mostly traditional, modern, contemporary, and so on, but a lot of Caribbean, West African, and modern stuff that was part of their repertoire. But working with that company and the experiences one would have, dealing with the media and the public and so on, as the only quote unquote white person in this Black company. And the kind of reactions that you would get from people, which would tell you right away that people have, they see you differently. Than you're not just part of the company because of your appearance. They see you differently. So in some ways, in some circles, you always have to prove yourself that you belong there. And in other areas, you experience things where you find that you are being accorded certain privileges that the other people that you're with. Subtle things, very subtle things at times, because Canadians are generally not overtly racist. If they are, 99% of the time, 99.9% of the time, it's simply a matter of ignorance, or not being aware that they're not being sensitive to people. So I put all this on the table as a way of opening the debate about how the interpersonal relationships we have when it comes to race, and how that plays out in our lives, and what can we do as individuals to make the people better informed about what being Black is, and what being a minority is, and how we can do things to make improvements in our lives and in the lives of others, and to make sure that we do not fall into behaviors or situations where we let things happen and we don't speak up. We see injustices being done, or things that are not right or not fair, and we kind of we don't want to say anything. We don't want to rock the boat. We don't want to to make people uncomfortable. So we just kind of let it slide. And that is something I've always tried to be aware of, and I don't know if I've succeeded 100%. There may be times when I have not, and I've always questioned, situations and circumstances. And in working with the Caribbean Carnival in particular, it reveals a lot of things, because the festival itself is a microcosm of what's going on in the wider society, how the festival integrates or does not integrate with the wider community is it tells us a lot about our city and our society. And to that, I could say that the Caribbean Carnival is the largest Caribbean cultural asset in the country. It's it's put up there as the poster child of multiculturalism for Canada, not even Toronto, for Canada, all over the world. People talk about Caribana and this wonderful festival in Toronto, Caribbean Festival, and is proof of Canadian tolerance and openness to other cultures. And to some extent that is true, but there's an underbelly there that does not quite line up with that impression. And it reflected in the fact that the festival itself is, after 55 years now, is still struggling to have some kind of firm financial standing or firm financial foundation on which it can build. It's always cap in hand year after year, even after all of these years and everything it has contributed to the city and to the country. It is still, starved of funding, and other similar festivals, are receive better funding arrangements. And it's it's something you have to question. Why is this so? And of course, the answers are not easy. Sometimes the answers are, there are deficiencies in the community in terms of arts administration and arts management, but it's also, there's a lot of people that they don't see this festival as a serious enterprise in cultural pursuit, as a cultural pursuit. It's a party. It's a big party on the street. And of course, it's a hell of a lot more than that. And it certainly means a lot more than that to the people who are part of the festival community, the Caribbean Carnival community, the Carnival arts community. This is something that is deep in our DNA, and it represents that whole idea of emancipation and freedom. And the festival brings that to the table, but it has not been able to move beyond the public perception that it's just a party on the streets. And the festival has the largest children's festival as a component of it, the largest children's festival in the country, the Junior Carnival, which takes place in Scarborough, where there are 3,000 children involved in costumes and music on the streets of Malvern every year. And there are people in Toronto that don't know about this. So it's remarkable that you can have the biggest festival in the country for children, and yet it's a secret. Nobody knows it. Why is that? There's something doesn't add up. So there's lots of things that you recognize when you're working in the arts, and you're looking at what's going down, and you're thinking about why is this the case, and why haven't we been able to integrate the festival in a more effective way into the wider arts community, and to benefit from all of the opportunities and resources that are available to other festivals and to other arts organizations. And like I said, the answers are sometimes quite complex, and it's not simple, where you can just say, well, it's because of this or because of that. There are usually a number of reasons for the situation. But it does point out that we still have a lot of work to do as a society, in terms of building bridges between communities, and in terms of really walking the walk. You know, we talk the talk, but I'm talking about walking the walk now. How do we move beyond that, you know, superficial ideas of, yes, we believe in multiculturalism, although there's a lot of pushback on that these days. But what does that really mean when we get down to it, you know? And how do we make sure that we're not just saying things but not following through? So my experience as a musician, as an artist, working in the Caribbean community, but also having the opportunity to work in the wider arts community, that has been my experience, that there's still a lot of hurdles for our community to overcome to get that acceptance in the wider community. A lot of it is, some of it, like I said, is self-imposed isolation. We feel comfortable within our own space, and we don't want to move out of it. But a lot of it is also, when we try to move out of it, we run into barriers and we run into roadblocks. And some of them are overt, some of them are not so overt. But it's all about keeping you in your place. And I would like to see that change. You know, I would like to see the festival and the Caribbean arts become a Canadian expression of, you know, a genuinely Canadian phenomenon, not just an exotic kind of thing that we have brought here and put on display. And, you know, we allow everybody to do their thing within that community, and we celebrate it, but we don't really, it's not part of the wider community. It's just something that we put on show to show off how liberal and how open-minded and how you know, welcoming we are to other cultures. So Toronto is an absolutely amazing city to live in. It has so much to offer to someone like myself and the younger Caribbean artists who are coming along. Because you know, I've had my kick at the can, and I'm still kicking the can along the way. You know, I turned 70 last year, and I decided time to go back to school. So I signed up for York, and I'm doing a master's in Calypso Rhythms. And to lo and behold, it's free. It does not cost me to attend York. No, this is absolutely amazing. You know, that you can, at my age, I can go to school and have this incredible opportunity to study and to access knowledge and resources that you know, it's just beyond anything I would have ever had in the Caribbean for free. To give an example, there is as part of my studies, I'm studying Calypso music from the 30s and 40s, and there's a box set of about 10 CDs as part of this collection that was put out several years ago. And you can't get it in Barbados or probably in Trinidad. You have to buy it online, probably for close to $1,000, if not more, in terms of Barbadian currency. I just drove up the street to Glendon Hall Library and was able to take it out on loan there. So it shows you the amazing resources we have here in Canada as artists and everyone. You know, we all have these resources at our fingertips here, living in a big urban space like Toronto. And so there's so many opportunities for us to improve our or knowledge and or situation. And I hope that we can continue to take advantage of these things. And it's organizations like the Anglican diocese that engage in events like this that really is bringing people together to talk about things so we can better understand each other and better understand each other's challenges, and better understand how we can enrich each other's lives and really benefit from, you know, this great opportunity that we have here, being in this beautiful city of Toronto at this time. I'm going to
interrupt
shut
you.
up at this point. Pardon?
I was just going to say, I'm going to interrupt you to tell you that there are people that would love to ask you questions, and
Oh,
we
please
don't
do.
have time for it.
I am going to open the floor for questions, because I've been kind of meandering along, just talking about personal things and trying to create a context that would hopefully help people understand where I'm at and what I'm thinking about, and how this all fits into the general discussion that we're having about, you know, the voices of the other, those who come from somewhere else, or are part of communities that are not in the mainstream. So I will open the floor to questions gladly.
So I have gotten a couple of messages, which are questions. And the first one was, how have you used your art forum to identify anti-Black racism and to do something about it?
Well, I think what I have tried to do is I have always tried to champion the music and the arts of the Caribbean, because I thought that by doing that and showing people the value of it and engaging them in the, you know, you can, there are different ways of selling your story, and for me it has been music and the arts. So I've always tried to bring the arts and culture of my island, of the island of Trinidad, which is more or less a second home, and to do what I can to bring that to people and to explain it to people so that they better understand what motivates, what animates our lives, and how we see the world, you know, through the arts. So I think that's where I have always tried to do that. If it's not writing songs, or producing shows, or working with other artists to bring them to new audiences as a producer or an arranger. So I've always tried to move in as many circles as I can outside of the Caribbean community, and to bring the most what I think is the best examples of our cultural expressions to the fore, and hopefully stimulate the kind of conversations then about the people and what the art means, and generally what is the Caribbean Carnival all about, for instance. You know, I've talked on that topic so often, in so many quarters, where I've had to correct people, or just tell people, just explain a bit more to them what this festival is about, why people do what they do, why it's important, what it's bringing to the table in terms of Canadian art scene and cultural scene. So whether I'm sitting on a jury at the Toronto Arts Council, or I was, you know, with the Juno jurors, or any number of forum where I'm engaging with other artists from outside and the Black community, and just trying to give them some insight into the culture and to the beauty of the people that bring this culture to this Canada.
Thank you. Now, I have a couple of other questions that people have sent me in the chat, but I'd be delighted if there were some people who have questions who have not written them down, but would just like to raise their hand or just unmute themselves. Are there questions from the floor, basically? Okay, shall I go to the next one oh, there's Howard. Can you unmute, Howard?
Hi.
Hi, Roger. Thanks very much for that information that you provided. I'm curious, what would you say was your biggest culture shock response that you have received going into these various environments that you went into?
The biggest
Culture, like, okay, when they see you, they think that you are white, but then they get to realize that you came from a Black culture.
Yeah.
What would you say is the most memorial one that you will never forget, put it that way?
Well, you know, it like I said, the standard questions you get. Well, how come you're not Black? You know, and you try to kind of politely explain that, you know, the Caribbean is actually a multiracial society, and it's not quite as black and white as you think. You know, it's there's a lot of diversity within each country, and no less so in Barbados. You know, aside from, it's always been, I think, like recently, to give an example, it was I was part of a production with a choir that was presenting this show, and we were brought in as a guest. My group, which is an ensemble primarily of people of color, and the music we're doing is this Caribbean, acoustic Caribbean music. And you know, there was this sort of very not dismissive, but sort of just, well, that, you know, there was no sense of you know, oh, we have this person who drums here, we're going to get him to come and play with you, you know. I said, well, hello, hold it a second, what kind of, you know, you need to I think there's this sense that there's like, if it's Caribbean culture and Caribbean music, it doesn't have the same value, or it's not considered with the same seriousness as in this case, this classical music or choral music culture this person was coming from. So this attitude is that, you know, there's this type of music is there, and then your type of music is down here somewhere, and it's you know, it doesn't have the same level of respectability or seriousness or importance. And I've always found that to be a little bit hard to swallow, because art is about, you know, it doesn't matter if it's done well, you know, with a certain discipline and a certain attitude. It is beautiful. You know, art is beautiful. It's subjective, yes, but there should not be this hierarchy of my art is better than yours just because it's, you know, it's European based, or it comes out of the classical European tradition. And this calypso music that you're doing, oh, well, it's just, you know, anybody can do that. Oh, you know, it's not important. It doesn't have the same gravitas. It doesn't have the same respect. And so there's sometimes you get into situations where your music or your art is not given the same respect, and that plays out, you know, in how the program is handled or little decisions that are made, and it becomes quite obvious that the person in charge does not see your contribution in the same way as others.
Would you say then that that same kind of an attitude as reflected in the Caribbean, in the Caribbean carnival culture that you were involved in?
Oh yes, definitely so, and so there's that aspect of trying to overcome these ideas that, well, it's just, this is just people a party in the street, and then of course there's all there's all the other things that are happening that kind of confirm that, the commercialization of the culture, and the fact that many of the people within our community themselves don't quite have they're there for the wrong reasons, so it can be self-defeating, in that they're not asking for the respect themselves, they're just in it for the money. So you know the Caribbean, the arts in general have it's contributed a hell of a lot to this community of artists in Toronto. We have contributed greatly, but there's not that level of I feel there's not the level of engagement with the wider arts community. The Caribbean community it's ghettoized. It's off there in a ghetto. And I know that sounds a little harsh to say, but that's the reality.
I fully understand. I'll let somebody else speak, but if I have the time, I would like to come back on the same Caribana thing. I have another question there.
Well, one of the patterns in these events is that the questions could go on all night because the guests are so fabulous. Another question that I have got through the chat is twofold for the same person. One is a question about whether you're going to be performing any of your songs, and the other is what advice would you give to youth who might be straddling both cultures or thinking of immigrating to Canada from Barbados? So
that's a good question, because of course, when I came, the circumstances were different than they are now, and there may be things that are easier now that were more difficult back then, and vice versa. So it's not a clear picture, and I'm not quite sure in terms of younger artists. It all boils down to being true to yourself, and being proud of who you are, and being proud of your art and your culture. And
we've just lost
to not to take the internet connection. Oh, is that helping? Is that, are we okay?
We're back to good.
Not to take things. Yeah, okay. So not to try not to take things too personally, and to just to be prepared that you're going to run into roadblocks, you're going to run into opposition, you're going to run into difficulties in any person coming to a new country. There's always challenges in trying to connect. Canada is Toronto in particular is a very big city for someone coming from a small island, which is a population of 300,000. So you're growing up in a much different kind of network and society that's a lot more informal, maybe. It's more of a small town kind of scenario that you're growing up in, and you're being thrust into the big city, which is a lot more, people are it's a different challenges that you're going to face here. So it's hard to give any one piece of advice to someone, other than to say, well, it takes time. It takes time to get to know the lay of the land, to understand the particular area you're in, because it's much bigger than what you would have been experienced to back in the island. And you don't have the same contacts and so on. So it takes a while to get to know who the players are. get to know what services are available, what opportunities are available. And it can all be a bit, overwhelming at the beginning, but if you're prepared to keep at it, and you see things, the fog starts to clear after a while, and you start to make connections, and you start to see the opportunities, and one thing leads to another, and so on. So Toronto is such an amazing town. There's still things that I'm learning all the time about how this society works. So it's not something that you ever figure out either overnight or even after years or decades. You're always discovering things about the community you're living in, because it's changing all the time as well while you're trying to figure it out. So it's a matter of just telling people to come prepared to work, and the rewards will be great. You have so much more opportunities here than you would back on the island. You can create, in fact, you can create a Caribbean community here yourself, because even living on the island, you are isolated from the other islands and the people who live on those islands. Not so in Toronto. They all live here in the same geographical space, and you can connect to them physically. I know the internet has changed that a lot in worldwide, but so it doesn't matter where you're located, but there's a certain, there's a certain process that can only happen in person when you meet people in person. And the opportunity here you have as a Caribbean person, for example, if I wanted to create a band tomorrow with a trumpeter from Cuba and a drummer from Guyana and a bass player from Trinidad and a guitarist from Antigua, not a problem. I could do it because they're all here. I could not do that in Barbados. So Canada, ironically, this community in Toronto offers a person from the Caribbean, any part of the Caribbean, a unique opportunity to experience the Caribbean in a different way. You may not be physically in the Caribbean anymore, but you can make connections with people that you would find in person that you would find impossible to do on the island.
Well, I am really sorry to say this, but we have started to go creeping over time, and I am starting to get in trouble with the other people in charge of this event, because I've been so wrapped up in here listening to you and not trying to control the time. I really appreciate everybody's questions, and I'm sorry if I didn't get to your question that's in the chat. And thank you for your answers, Roger.